Oscar Reynolds stood quietly at the threshold of the house he had called home for nearly 4 decades. The key turned with a soft click, but it did not bring the comfort he had expected. His fingers trembled slightly, not from age, but from something deeper, harder to name. The scent that greeted him was unfamiliar, lemon cleaner perhaps, or just the absence of everything that had once been warm and real. He stepped inside, pausing to steady himself. The 2-week hospital stay had taken more than his strength. It had stolen his place. The living room, once a cozy chaos of memories, now looked like a page from a sterile catalog. His eyes swept over the walls, searching automatically for the framed photo of Sarah holding their newborn son. Gone. So was the crooked little shelf Ethan had built at 11. The books on the tall case had been rearranged by color, not by meaning. The brass lamp Sarah found at a garage sale, the one she insisted was ugly enough to be beautiful, was nowhere in sight. From the kitchen, Celeste's voice floated in. "Oscar, you're home." Her smile appeared a moment later, polite and thin, her dish towel still in hand. "You look better." She paused too long between the words, and her eyes said something else entirely. Oscar set down his small suitcase and the envelope of discharge papers. He scanned the room again, slower this time, as if daring it to explain what had happened in his absence. Ethan sat in his chair, Oscar's chair, facing the television with his laptop open. He did not look up. "Hey, Dad," Ethan muttered, not glancing away from the screen. That was it. No welcome, no questions about his recovery, no offer to take the bag from his hand. Oscar stood there, suspended between disbelief and heartbreak. He had imagined this moment a dozen times during those sterile hospital nights, his heart wired to machines that beeped like impatient clocks. But in those imaginings, Ethan had looked up. Celeste had hugged him. Something, anything, had felt like love. "I see things have changed," Oscar said quietly, his voice hoarser than he remembered. Celeste offered a smile that did not reach her eyes. "We were just cleaning up a bit. Things got cluttered." Cluttered. The word struck him like a slap. These were not knickknacks. They were pieces of life, of love. He said nothing, only nodded and moved toward the hallway. His surgical scar tugged sharply as he walked, a reminder of how close he had come to not walking at all. The garage door groaned open, revealing another small devastation. Cardboard boxes, dozens of them, lined the floor, each labeled in neat black ink. Oscar's tools, photos, recipe cards. He stepped closer, reading the careful handwriting that turned his entire life into inventory. On one box, garage, to donate. On another, Oscar's, storage. "Why are my things in boxes?" he asked. Ethan appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "We thought you might be more comfortable with a different arrangement." Oscar turned. "Different arrangement?" "You know, less clutter. Easier to get around. We figured with your condition, you wouldn't want to be tripping over stuff." "My condition?" Oscar's voice cracked, the anger creeping up through the hurt. "You mean the heart surgery I just survived without a single visit or phone call from my only son?" Ethan shrugged. "You're not getting any younger, Dad. The stairs are a hazard." "The doctor cleared me for normal activity." "Well, the doctor doesn't live here," Ethan said, his tone calm, but with an edge that sliced deep. That was the moment Oscar understood. He was no longer considered part of this household. Not truly. Ethan and Celeste had moved in, not just into the space, but into control. They spoke in we, made decisions in we, and Oscar, the man who had built this home with his own hands, had been downgraded to a temporary guest. He walked slowly to the staircase and began to climb. Each step was an effort, not just because of the healing wound under his shirt, but because of what waited at the top. His room, untouched, or so he hoped. As he moved, he could hear them speaking in the kitchen again, their voices low and unhurried, like planning something that did not involve him. When he reached his bedroom, he paused at the doorway. Some things had survived. The view of Hal Jenkins's porch, the soft creak of the floor beneath the window, the handful of framed photos beside the bed. He sat heavily on the mattress. The paper bag of prescriptions rustled in his coat pocket, But he did not move to unpack them. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow would be better. Maybe this was just shock, the strangeness of coming home after surgery. People needed time to adjust. Families, too. He had almost died. Maybe they just did not know how to say they were scared. But downstairs, the clinking of dishes and the drone of the television sounded far too normal, too settled. It was the rhythm of people who had adjusted quite well, without him. Oscar lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling. He pressed one hand to his chest, where the surgeon had cracked open bone to save his life. The physical pain was easing, but something else was starting to ache, something deeper. It was the ache of being erased. The first light of morning crept through the slats of the window blinds, slicing the room into pale stripes. Oscar lay still, unsure at first if the heaviness in his chest was a leftover from sleep or something more ominous. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 7:30, its red numbers too bright against the dim room. He shifted slightly. A wave of nausea rolled over him. His hand reached for the glass of water beside the bed, but his arm felt impossibly heavy. His muscles, still healing from surgery, screamed with even the smallest effort. He tried again, this time lifting his head, and the room spun sideways. Something was wrong. This was not the dull soreness of recovery. This was sharper, deeper. Pressure pressed against his sternum like an unseen weight. His mouth was dry, his breathing shallow. Sweat broke out on his forehead, chilling him against the morning air. Oscar thought of Dr. Simmons' voice, calm but firm. If you experience chest pressure, shortness of breath, or dizziness, call for help immediately. Do not wait. Do not risk it. His gaze slid to the dresser across the room. The phone sat there, silent and unreachable. "Ambulance," he whispered hoarsely, the word barely leaving his lips. He swallowed and tried again, louder. "Ethan!" No response. He closed his eyes for a moment, summoning strength from the place where stubbornness lived, that same place that had pulled him through war, through the death of his wife, through the cold nights alone in a hospital bed. He planted one hand against the mattress and tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his chest. His legs buckled beneath him as he stood, and he caught himself just in time. He staggered to the door, gripping the frame, and called again, this time louder, rasping. "Ethan!" Below, the faint gurgle of the coffee maker answered. Somewhere, a television mumbled the morning news. Familiar domestic sounds. Ordinary sounds. But not for him. Not now. He forced himself forward, half walking, half dragging. Every breath was a battle. Every heartbeat sounded too loud in his ears. He clung to the hallway wall, reached the top of the stairs, and found the door to the hallway had been closed. Oscar reached for the knob, turned it. It did not budge. Locked. He blinked, confused, as if the concept did not compute. Why would it be locked? He jiggled it again. Nothing. The metal was cold against his hand. He knocked weakly, then pounded with what little force he had. "Ethan!" he cried again, but this time there was panic. "I need help!" Footsteps echoed from below, not hurried, just the soft pad of socks on hardwood. Then Ethan's voice floated up, casual, bored. "What is it, Dad?" Oscar could barely process the tone, not worry, not urgency, just inconvenience. "I feel terrible," Oscar croaked. "Call an ambulance, please." There was a pause, a long one, then nothing. No more footsteps, no turning of the lock, no reply. Oscar leaned his head against the door and slid slowly to the floor, his breath coming in short gasps. His fingers curled into the carpet. His heart thundered, not with emotion this time, but with mechanical failure. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. He imagined Sarah's voice beside him, calm and grounding, the way she had always been. "You're going to be okay. Just breathe. I'm right here." But she was not there. And neither was Ethan, not really. Minutes passed. Footsteps returned. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly, and Ethan stepped into view, hair tousled, pajama shirt wrinkled. He looked down at Oscar slumped on the floor, a faint frown of irritation crossing his face. "What's going on?" I need help," Oscar managed, pointing toward the dresser where the phone still sat untouched. Call. Ethan did not move. Instead, his eyes flicked to the phone, then to Oscar, then back again. No, Dad, he said, calm and flat. I won't call. Oscar stared at him, not comprehending. What? I won't call, Ethan repeated. You'll be fine. He stepped past his father, lifted the phone from the dresser, and slipped it into his pocket like it was a trivial object. A toothbrush. A pen. The silence that followed was so complete it hummed. Oscar's eyes widened. What are you doing? I could die. Ethan looked at him with a strange calm. Maybe that would be for the best. The words landed like ice water. Oscar wanted to shout, to fight, to rise up, but his body betrayed him. He tried to push up from the floor, but his arms buckled again. His voice cracked. Ethan, you're my son. You're a burden, Ethan said flatly. Then he turned and walked away. The door closed. The lock clicked again. Oscar's breathing came faster now. The betrayal, raw, fresh, and unreal, coiled inside him, even sharper than the pain in his chest. He pounded weakly against the wood. Let me out! Open the door! But the only reply was the fading sound of footsteps. Back to the coffee, back to the TV, back to normal life. Oscar slumped against the door, heart hammering, lungs aching. His son, his only son, had left him to die. And he was utterly, terrifyingly, alone. The room felt smaller now. The air inside was stale and heavy, like the breath of something old and dying. Oscar leaned his back against the door, sliding down until he sat in a crumpled heap on the floor. His heart pounded in uneven rhythm. The pain had settled in, deep and persistent, not only in his chest, but in the hollow space where hope used to live. He stared at the dresser across the room, the space where his phone had rested. Gone. Like so many other things lately. Gone without discussion, without dignity. He closed his eyes, sweat beading at his temples. Each inhale was shallow. Each exhale felt like surrender. He thought of Sarah again. She would have known what to do. She would have held his hand, whispered calm into the chaos. But Sarah was gone. And her son, their son, was not coming back up those stairs. The window. The thought came not like a shout, but a whisper, subtle, insistent. The window overlooked Hal Jenkins's yard. Hal, who had been his neighbor for 15 years. Who waved every morning, rain or shine. Who brought over tomatoes each summer and asked last week how Oscar was recovering, if anyone might notice, if anyone might care. It was Hal. Oscar pressed a trembling hand to the floor, then another. He tried to crawl, but his arms quivered beneath his weight. Every movement sent bolts of pain through his ribs, his spine, his healing chest. But he moved anyway, because not moving meant giving up. And Oscar Reynolds had never been one to go quietly. The distance to the window, 12 feet maybe, felt like miles. The carpet burned against his palms. His knees ached as he dragged himself inch by inch across the room. Furniture legs became anchors. Sweat ran into his eyes. His breath came in ragged bursts. But still, he moved. When he reached the window, he rested his head against the glass for a moment, feeling the cool pain ground him. Then he forced his body upward, using the radiator and the sill to leverage himself just enough to peek outside. Sunlight poured across the yard below. Hal's driveway stretched in a familiar curve. A bright blue newspaper lay untouched near the curb. Then, movement. Hal stepped outside, wearing his old gray Northwestern sweatshirt and a pair of worn gardening gloves. He stooped beside his tomato plants, inspecting the soil. Oscar raised one arm, his hand pressed flat against the glass. It took everything he had just to knock. Tap, tap, tap. Hal looked up, squinting. Oscar opened his mouth and forced sound from his raw, cracked throat. "Hal," he croaked. "Hal, help me!" Hal froze. Their eyes met, and then, blessedly, Hal moved. He stood straight, dropped his trowel, and began walking toward his back door with surprising speed. Oscar collapsed against the wall beneath the window, relief sweeping over him so quickly that it left him dizzy. Hal had seen him. Hal was calling. Help was coming. He let his head rest against the wall, the same wall that had felt like a prison minutes earlier. Now it felt like support. He did not know how long it would take. He did not know what Ethan would do when he realized, but he had cracked the silence, broken through the isolation. From below, the faint hum of a voice on the phone drifted up. Hal's voice, firm, clear, authoritative. Cardiac distress, elderly male, locked inside, send someone now. Oscar smiled, or tried to. His lips twitched upward, but the motion hurt. Everything hurt. Still, he had done it. Now all he had to do was hold on. But then he heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, measured. Coming up the stairs. The noise twisted the relief in his chest into dread. Ethan. He was coming. He must have heard Oscar's cries through the window. Must have seen Hal moving. Understood what was happening. The steps slowed near the door. Oscar could picture him, standing on the other side, weighing his options. The lock clicked. The door swung open, slamming against the wall. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, hair still mussed from sleep, but his expression had changed. Gone was the detached calm. In its place was something wild, angry, exposed. "What did you do?" Ethan hissed. Oscar backed away from the window instinctively, the cold glass replaced by the cold certainty that this man, his son, was no longer pretending. "I called for help," Oscar said, voice hoarse but steady. Ethan's eyes darted toward the window, then back to Oscar. "You stupid old—" Oscar didn't flinch. He kept his back straight, his breath shallow but even. "I may be old," he whispered, "but I'm not dead. Not yet." Ethan stared at him for a long moment, then turned. Walked out. The door remained open this time. Oscar sat there, chest burning, limbs shaking. Below he heard a new sound, sirens in the distance. Faint at first, but growing louder, clear, real. He closed his eyes and let himself breathe again. Help was coming. 2 days passed in quiet recovery. Oscar lay in a hospital bed beneath soft white sheets, surrounded by the subtle hum of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes. A plastic bracelet marked his name, date of birth, and the words, cardiac monitoring. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and warmed coffee from the nurses' station down the hall. It was peaceful, safe, for now. But peace was not Oscar's goal anymore. He stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them again. Not because he was bored, but because it helped him think. A plan had begun to take shape inside him, built not from vengeance, but from a need deeper than anger. Justice, not for revenge, but to be heard, to be seen, to protect others like him. He had nearly died in that room. Not because his body had failed, but because someone who was supposed to love him decided he was no longer worth saving. And that person was still walking free. Oscar glanced toward the table beside his bed, where a small digital voice recorder rested, the same one he had once bought to preserve Sarah's stories. They had never gotten around to recording them. Life had moved too fast. Grief had come too soon. Now it had a new purpose. The nurse, Jennifer, stepped in, checking his vitals. "Your heart's stronger than half the guys on this floor," she smiled. "You might be heading home sooner than expected." Oscar smiled politely. "Just as long as I do not go back to a place where I am not wanted." She gave him a sympathetic look but did not pry. Nurses saw too much to ask too many questions. After she left, Oscar picked up the recorder, turning it over in his hands. It still worked. He tested the audio, listened to his own hoarse voice repeat a few trial phrases. The sound was clear, strong enough to capture a conversation from across a room. Later that afternoon, he made a quiet call to Officer Maria Gonzalez. the same officer who had followed up after Hal's 911 call. They spoke only briefly, but her tone shifted as he described what had happened. "Sir," she said, her voice professional but warm, "if what you're saying is true, and you can provide proof, we can act. Elder neglect and unlawful confinement are serious charges in this state." "I intend to provide that proof," Oscar replied. "All I need is a bit of time, and the chance to speak to my son, alone." Maria hesitated. "We do not encourage confrontations, sir." "This will not be a confrontation," Oscar said. "It will be a conversation, a recorded one." When he returned home the next evening, the silence in the house was thicker than before. Ethan was waiting, arms crossed, standing near the hallway like a school principal. "I heard you're feeling better." Oscar walked past him, ignoring the edge in his tone. "Miraculously." Celeste peeked out from the kitchen. She looked tired. Guilty, maybe, or simply weary from keeping quiet too long. "Dinner's in the oven," she offered. Oscar gave her a nod, then climbed the stairs, every step measured. The pain was still there, tightness in the chest, fatigue in the bones, but his mind had never been sharper. That night, he lay awake long after the house had gone quiet. The recorder rested on his nightstand. He listened to the soft click as he pressed record, then stop. Over and over, getting used to the sound, timing the delay, practicing lines in his head. The next morning, Oscar dressed in his favorite sweater. The green one Sarah had once said made his eyes look brighter. He tucked the recorder into the inside pocket, buttoned the sweater over it, walked downstairs. The sun streamed through the windows. Celeste was gone, off to work. Only Ethan remained, sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone at the kitchen table. Oscar sat across from him. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Oscar spoke, calm, controlled. "I was thinking," he began, "about the house, about what happens to it when I'm gone." Ethan did not look up. "I always thought this place would go to someone who respected it, someone who remembered what it meant." Ethan smirked. "That's a big assumption." Oscar nodded slowly. "Yes, I suppose it is." Another pause. "I wonder," Oscar continued, "what someone like you would do with $300,000. Maybe invest? Maybe move far away?" That got Ethan's attention. His eyes flicked up, sharp. "What are you getting at?" "I'm just curious," Oscar said, leaning back in his chair. "What would it take for someone to think? The quicker I'm gone, the better." Ethan stiffened. "That's a hell of a thing to say. But is it wrong?" The air in the room shifted. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You always had a way of twisting things, acting like you were some noble old man who did everything right. You think just because you raised me and paid the bills that I owe you my life?" Oscar said nothing. Ethan slammed his mug down. "You have no idea what it's like watching your inheritance rot away in front of you." There it was. Oscar's hand remained still, resting lightly on the table. The recorder was running. Every word was captured. "You think I should have dropped everything to hold your hand in the hospital?" Ethan hissed. "You think I should have saved you? Maybe I should have. Maybe I shouldn't have." Oscar leaned forward slightly. "Thank you." Ethan blinked. "For what?" "For telling me exactly who you are." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Ethan turned, startled. "Who the hell?" Oscar stood up slowly. "That would be Officer Gonzalez." Ethan's face drained of color. Oscar opened the door. 2 officers stepped in, calm but firm. "Ethan Reynolds?" Officer Gonzalez asked. Ethan looked at his father, then at the officers. "What is this?" "We'd like you to come with us to answer a few questions," she said, producing a small device. "We've received an audio recording that may constitute evidence of elder abuse." Ethan's eyes burned with rage. "You set me up." Oscar shook his head. "No, son, I finally listened. And now, so will they." Ethan sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, one knee bouncing, his jaw clenched, eyes darting between Oscar and the open front door. Outside, the two police officers waited politely by their cruiser, giving father and son a moment that neither had earned, but Oscar had requested. Oscar stood quietly in the living room, hands behind his back, his posture dignified in a way Ethan had not seen in years. The light from the late afternoon sun poured in through the large window, catching the dust in the air, making it look like the house was full of ghosts. Maybe it was. "I asked them to wait," Oscar said softly, "because I believe in saying things plain, even when it hurts." Ethan scoffed. "You mean after you ambushed me with a recorder and the police?" Oscar ignored the bitterness in his tone. "I asked you questions and you answered truthfully. No one forced you. The truth is not a trap, Ethan. It is when you twist it." Oscar's voice stayed steady. "What I recorded was your voice, your words, your intent." Ethan stood suddenly. "You don't understand how this works, Dad. You think this little game will end with me in cuffs? You think they'll throw me in prison because I was frustrated with you?" Oscar met his gaze. "You left me to die." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. His face twitched, anger warring with panic. Oscar took a slow step forward. "I raised you. I protected you when you were small. I held your hand when you were sick. You have every right to resent me if I failed you as a father. But what you did to me wasn't about failure. It was about greed." Ethan turned away, pacing. "You don't know what it's like to carry you, to keep pretending everything's fine, to watch your savings drain away on meds and hospital visits, knowing that everything I ever hoped to build was trapped in this house with you." Oscar's heart did not race. It broke, quietly, but it did not stop him. "I was not your jailer," he said gently. "You made yourself one the day you stopped seeing me as your father and started seeing me as an obstacle." Ethan turned back to him, eyes full of venom. "You want to feel like a martyr? Go ahead. But do not act like I was the only one tired. You wanted everything your way, always. I'm not sorry for wanting you out of the picture. I'm only sorry it didn't work." The room went still. Even Ethan realized, too late, what he had just confessed. Oscar pressed his hand against the inside of his sweater, stopping the recorder. Then he turned toward the front door. Before he could reach it, Celeste walked in, keys in one hand, grocery bag in the other. She froze, immediately sensing the tension in the room. Her eyes flicked from Oscar to Ethan and then to the two officers standing on the porch. "What's going on?" she asked. Ethan's voice broke. "He recorded me. He tricked me." Oscar did not turn around. "I did not trick you. I gave you a chance to tell the truth. You chose what you said." Celeste's lips parted, her expression unreadable. Officer Gonzalez stepped forward from the porch. "We have enough now to begin formal questioning. Mr. Reynolds," she looked at Ethan, "you will need to come with us. Please bring identification." Ethan looked at his wife. "Celeste, say something." She stood very still, eyes fixed on her husband. Then slowly she placed the grocery bag on the counter and spoke. Soft, almost inaudible. "He's right." Ethan froze. "I heard what you said just now, and he's right." His mouth moved, but no sound came. "You stopped being a son the moment you stopped caring whether your father lived or died. I don't know who you are anymore, Ethan." For once, Ethan had nothing left to say. Oscar stepped outside into the golden light. The sirens were off now. The neighborhood calm again. A few curtains twitched from across the street, but no one stepped outside. It was not a scene. It was a reckoning. Ethan followed reluctantly, flanked by officers Gonzalez and Patel. Celeste remained inside. As the cruiser pulled away, Oscar stood quietly on the sidewalk, watching it disappear into the curve of the street. He did not feel triumphant. He felt clean, for the first time in a long time. Hal Jenkins appeared beside him, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He offered one without a word. Oscar took it. Together they stood in silence, neighbors again. Eventually Hal spoke. "You did what needed to be done." Oscar nodded. That does not make it easy. No, but it makes it right. They sipped quietly, the cicadas humming in the trees, the late summer wind brushing past them like a sigh. Oscar looked at the house. It would not be his much longer. And that, too, felt right. The house was quiet again. But this time, it was a gentle quiet. Not the kind born from fear, but from peace. Afternoon light streamed through the living room window, bathing the floor in golden warmth. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, undisturbed. Oscar stood near the doorway, one hand resting lightly on the wall, the other holding a mug of tea he had brewed himself. Everything was packed. Boxes were labeled with calm, clear handwriting. Nothing was rushed. No clutter, no mess. Only intention. The for sale sign swayed softly in the yard, its edges fluttering in the late summer breeze. A red pending sticker had been slapped across the front that morning. Soon, the house would belong to someone else, someone who might fill it with laughter and cooking smells and family arguments that ended in forgiveness. Oscar was leaving something behind, but he was also bringing something with him. From the corner of the room, he picked up a small leather photo album. Inside were pictures of Sarah, on their wedding day in the garden, holding baby Ethan in her arms, laughing with Oscar on their trip to the Grand Canyon. Her eyes sparkled in every shot, always caught mid-story, as if she were just about to say something funny. He flipped to the last page. A photo of Hal, Oscar, and a much younger Ethan, grilling burgers on the back patio, back when summers felt endless and simple. Oscar smiled softly, then closed the album and placed it in a canvas tote marked, "Personal, Keep Close." Hal arrived just after lunch, carrying a box of chocolate chip cookies and his usual easy smile. He stepped into the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. After all these years, none was needed. "You sure about this?" Hal asked, already reaching for 2 plates. Oscar nodded. "I am. The folks at Willow Creek called this morning. They've got a room ready for me. Quiet wing, big window, even a reading nook." Hal raised his eyebrows. "Sounds like luxury." "It's not the Four Seasons," Oscar chuckled, "but it'll do." They sat at the table, sharing the cookies like they had done 100 times before, the silence between them comfortable. After a while, Hal leaned forward. "You know, a few of us meet on Thursday nights. Poker. Mostly for nickels, sometimes Oreos. You should come." Oscar smiled. "Only if you promise not to cry when I take your money." Hal grinned. "No promises." Later that day, Celeste arrived. She stood on the porch for a long moment before knocking. When Oscar opened the door, her eyes were red-rimmed, but she looked him in the eye. "I'm not here to explain him," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Oscar stepped aside, letting her in. They sat in the living room, facing each other like strangers who used to know one another. "I should have said something," she continued. "I should have helped you. I just froze." Oscar nodded. "I know. I never expected things to turn out this way." "Neither did I." She looked down. "Are you angry?" He shook his head. "No. Anger's too heavy to carry where I'm going." She swallowed hard. "He'll probably go to trial." Oscar didn't respond. Instead, he looked out the window, watching a cardinal land gently on the porch railing. "Sarah always said cardinals were signs," he said softly, "messages from loved ones." Celeste followed his gaze. "I hope you find peace," she said. "I already have," he replied. She left without hugging him, but the space between them felt cleaner somehow. A goodbye that held no bitterness, only clarity. By evening, Oscar had finished the last of his tea, turned off the lights, and placed a note on the kitchen table. It read, "To the next owner, this house kept me safe, taught me hard lessons, and gave me 1,000 memories. Treat her kindly." He stepped out onto the porch, where a taxi waited quietly at the curb. As the car pulled away, Oscar did not look back. Ahead lay a smaller room, a softer bed, a community of faces he had not yet met. But he would bring his stories, his books, his memories. And this time, he would not wait for permission to speak. He would live, not just survive. And in that quiet, new chapter, Oscar Reynolds was no longer the forgotten man. He was simply free. Even after the last box was taped shut and the front door clicked softly behind him, something of Oscar Reynolds remained inside that quiet house. Not in the furniture or the walls, but in the silence he had reclaimed, in the space where a man once erased found the courage to write himself back in. This was never just a story about a father and son, or about growing old. It was a quiet uprising, a reminder that dignity does not come from strength of body, but strength of heart. Oscar didn't shout. He didn't seek revenge. He simply told the truth, clear, calm, and undeniable. And in doing so, he lit a match in the dark, not to burn bridges, but to illuminate what had been hidden too long. The real power in Oscar's story lies in how he chose to face injustice, not with anger, but with clarity, not with bitterness, but with quiet resilience. He showed us that even when the world stops listening, we can still be heard, especially when we speak with honesty and grace. And in a time when so many feel invisible, his stand reminds us that the smallest voice, when rooted in truth, can echo louder than cruelty. Just like a single porch light on a long, quiet street, one act of courage can guide someone home. It may not change the past, but it can change what comes next. And sometimes, that's more than enough. So take a moment. Reflect not just on Oscar's journey, but on the people in your life who may be silently holding on, waiting to be seen. If this story touched your heart, consider passing that warmth along to someone who might need reminding that their voice, too, still matters. Because justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it knocks quietly, right when we need it most.